Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 90 of 2024. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. Follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us at the Oddsbreakers. Follow us on social media / the Oddsbreakers. This episode is being brought to you by MyBookie.ag for an up to $1,000 sign-up bonus wherever you're at. Please visit this podcast description. Click on the link. Terms, conditions, and location apply. If you'd like to support the Oddsbreakers and benefit from our premium plays, please visit theoddsbreakers.com. Click shop, become a member, pick any. For winning cappers, get the premium plays before the line moves. You can also support us on patreon.com. And if nothing else, please visit the Oddsbreakers and become a free picks and Telegram subscriber. Something amazing happened on Tuesday, my friends. Something completely amazing. Something that I'm going to remember for the rest of this day. Central Michigan backdoored Bowling Green at home to cover the 14 points. I didn't give that out as a premium play, but I was very happy to cash on that one because Bowling Green went up by 16. But I know Jim McElwain, he loves to cover spreads, and he just gave those kids everything that he had motivation-wise to go and score with about a minute left on the clock. So I was very happy about that. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. We have a great show for you today because it's all college football, baby. Josh Nunn from the Action Network at Step on a Duck is going to come and join us to talk about a huge weekend of college football, a very playoff-centric weekend as some teams are clearly playing for their lives. So can't wait to talk to Josh a little bit about that. Real quick, college basketball is rolling. We already went 4-0 on our plays. So if you're interested in becoming a member and cashing with me, please check out my college basketball package. It's only $250. You can also do monthly or yearly packages at theoddsbreakers.com for a huge discount. Obviously, our monthly package is guaranteed. So make sure you check us out at theoddsbreakers.com if you're interested in having some fun with us, or maybe you just like the show and you want to support us and get our thoughts on plays and access to our premium power ratings. Real quick on the college football committee's job. Yeah, I thought they did fine. I have no gripes. It's too early for this stuff. You know, Indiana shouldn't be in the top 5. I have a future on Indiana to make the playoffs and to win the conference at 200-1 each, you know? So I'm okay with them at 9 or 10, even with those futures, because the truth is they haven't beaten anybody. The Ohio State's going to have to be the test, and they're just going to have to step it up. Now, it'd be nice if they blow away Michigan, because they have been blowing away teams. And if they lose to Ohio State and beat Purdue, I think they still should be in the playoffs no matter what, even if they lose the Big Ten championship game because they made it there. But that's just another argument for another day, you know, and this thing's really heating up here towards the end. But, yeah, you know, no big thoughts. I mean, the truth is you have to kind of balance it between the best teams and the most deserving early. Hopefully you get the best teams in. You're probably going to get the 15th one wrong because they're actually the 15th power rated, but they're in the top 10 because they had an easy schedule. You're going to get that. You know, you're going to get that in college football, but at least, you know, you shouldn't have a gripe because you shouldn't have lost games. Remember, we were just at 4 games, so we should be happy for what we have. Also wanted to mention, before Josh comes on, some college football ATS trends. Indiana sitting at the top still, 8-1 against the spread. They get their bye after Michigan this week. Minnesota 7-1-1, covering machines over there. Man, they should not have covered against Illinois last week. That was a bad loss for me. BYU 7-1, Army 6-1. Then you got Eastern Michigan at 7-2, Tulane at 7-2, Vandy at 7-2, Pitt at 6-2, South Carolina at 6-2, and kind of so on and so forth there. Even Colorado up there at 6-2, right? Then going on the bottom of the barrel, you have Arizona at 1-8, now the worst covering team in the land. Air Force 1-7, Liberty 1-6, Georgia State 1-5-2. But the rest of the teams have 2 covers or more. You know, Michigan sitting at 2-7, Florida State 2-6-1. Even Florida State covered a couple games this year. Kansas sitting at 2-6. They have a big game this weekend, trying to upset Iowa State's hopes and dreams for the future. Let's move on to totals real quick. Top total overs team, Iowa, believe it or not, 8-1. Iowa's the top overs team in the nation. I never thought I'd say that this year. Miami 7-1-1, Navy 7-1, North Texas 7-1, Maryland 7-1, Ball State 7-1. Then you have some 7-2s, Mississippi State, Toledo, Indiana, and New Mexico. Now for the unders teams on the bottom, Houston 1-8. 1 over, 8 unders. Florida State 1-8. Utah 1-7. Washington 2-7. Illinois 2-7. Hawaii 2-7. Mississippi 2-7. Kennesaw State 2-6. And James Madison, Georgia Tech, Penn State, and Missouri all are 2-6. So those are your bottom of the barrel. Bet the under teams. It's weird to see Ole Miss there with that lane train type offense. Even Washington with Jed Fish. I expected them to have more overs, but I'm kind of reluctant still. I think the market is probably caught up on them, but I always bet wisely. Well, my friends, we have a lot to talk about, so let's bring in our wonderful guest, Mr. Josh Nunn from the Action Network. Now, I'm very excited to welcome for the first time to this show a man that's been on shows with me many times with Kyle Hunter on Fridays. You know him from the Action Network, and Joshua Nunn. You can follow Josh on Twitter at StepOnADuck. I love that Twitter name, by the way, man. Josh, thanks for coming on the show. Speaking of that, can you give us a little history about you and how you got that just unique Twitter handle at StepOnADuck?
I will, yeah. Thanks for having me on, Kiev. It's a privilege to be on with you. So a little background on me. I have been betting on college football and college basketball pretty seriously for 16 years and really focus on the Group of Five and FCS content in the college leagues, along with regular season win unders. My Twitter handle was birthed out of a previous job I used to have. I had a nickname of the Duck, and it's not a play on the Oregon Ducks, which some people oftentimes mistake. This was a play on words off of one of my favorite movies, Caddyshack.
Oh.
Rodney Dangerfield had a line in that movie, Step on a Duck. So I thought it was kind of funny and humorous and incorporate the duck in there. So that's where that was birthed from.
Well, there you go. God, now I remember that a little bit. I haven't watched Caddyshack in a long time, but definitely a classic. And
It's a great movie.
There's a lot of one-liners from that, and I do enjoy golf. So I love going out and golf. And Caddyshack, a legendary movie. So that's cool. Now I know. Well, that's wonderful. Step on a Duck's like, how am I going to take advice from Step on a Duck? Well, there you go. Caddyshack. At least it's a sports reference too. So that's
right,
fun.
yeah.
But your knowledge is great, and I'm real excited to talk to you about this, man. It's funny. The college football rankings came out. And it's so funny. People expect these reactions like Indiana should be higher. No, they shouldn't. The funny thing about the rank is what I said and briefly before you came on. I just said it just doesn't matter yet. I guess it's just for them to get their feet wet and see what kind of reactions people have I think the committee kind of does it for themselves. But looking at this, you got some interesting scenarios here because the Big 12 is kind of a mess. How many teams are going to get pulled for the Big 12? I think they're going to pull 2. And I don't even know if it's necessarily going to be the conference championship loser. It could be Colorado. But, just brings me down to these rankings, and I look at Indiana and BYU, and then SMU sitting there, I believe, at 13 it was. I have to pull them up again, I think it was. I'd like to ask you, which one of these one-loss teams doesn't make to the playoffs?
Yeah, it's a real interesting scenario, right? The season's already 75% of the way over, and the conference races are really taking shape. Oftentimes throughout the season, I'll try to add to my position in my futures portfolio and try to find some teams that have some value, even maybe after an initial loss, or teams that have gone on a run and kind of tackled the tougher part of their conference schedule. And so I've done a little bit of that, but there's really not much left that you can pick off from a futures perspective. And now the focus really goes into a new and emerging market, which is teams that will or will not make the playoff. And so one I think that there could be some value on still is BYU. No, I think that's about minus 120 or so to not make the playoff. BYU still has four games on their schedule against really stiff competition that are all kind of vying and jockeying for position. And while BYU has played very solid football over the first 8 weeks of the season for them, man, they've really benefited from some fortuitous turnover luck and really some flurry type of activity in their games. And so I could see BYU missing.
Absolutely. And I suppose, and what we're really asking is which is the most logical one, because we all agree that all of these guys could lose, I almost think, and I have the Indiana tickets at 200-1, to make the playoffs. So I did that before the season.
Incredible.
Oh, I know. It's like, should I be hedging now? I could technically, but I'm going to wait a little bit. But, the thing about Indiana, is Purdue a trap game at the end, or do they just crap the bed? I've seen this before in college. Let's say lose to Ohio State and then lose to Purdue. It would be absolutely insane, but that would completely kick them out at 2 losses. I worry that they lose to Ohio State and get blown out, and then for some reason they're back. Ohio State does something. They're playing Oregon or something in a championship. Could that happen? Now, I don't know the tiebreaker completely. I think they look at strength of record a little bit. Maybe you know a little bit more about that, but I think the best scenario for me is Indiana lose a respectable game against Ohio State and then beat Purdue by a good amount and don't get into the conference championship, because I think they can't leave a 1-loss Big Ten team over a 3-loss SEC team, or even some of the 2-loss SEC teams as well. But I'm gonna agree with you on BYU, just because at ASU I think is really tricky, and I will say that Houston is really playing with really Fritz some very good football, and I could see that being kind of a trap for them at the end. Kansas being a little bit desperate, but I think SMU is pretty close as well. SMU almost lost to Duke before they blew away Pittsburgh, and I know they outgained Duke and everything, but they're the ones that lost to BYU, and I guess that loss has really aged pretty well for them. But it's almost like SMU, now that Clemson lost, they might go to the ACC championship and get blown out. And if they get blown out, dude, they're going to be a 2-loss ACC team, and that's might even be frowned upon a little bit more than some of the Big 12.
Yeah, and the question would be, are they going to take Clemson above SMU if SMU has 2 losses and Clemson has 2 losses, or who would be that next team outside of Miami within the ACC to secure a bid? Or is the ACC going to be sitting there with one team that gets in? I think in the regular season, it could be safe to assume that SMU won't lose again. I mean, they host Boston College, at Virginia, and then hosting Cal are 3 games they'll be heavily favored in by more than a touchdown. So significant favorites in that one there. I will also say, if they're playing Miami in the ACC championship game, that's a high variance situation, right? What's the line going to be on that? 9.5, 10 in favor of Miami? And I mean, Miami has played really up and down football, even though they have not resulted in a loss this year. So it'll be real interesting to see. You could make the argument that Miami should have 2 losses based on the way that they've played against some of the lesser competition on their schedule. Very fortuitous that they escaped Cal with a win. And goodness, even that Virginia Tech game came down to the very end. It was an official ruling that determined whether or not they won the game.
Well, I'm going to say that they do get in ahead of Clemson if they finish out and lose in the ACC title game, because they beat Louisville at Louisville and Clemson lost to Louisville at home. And I think that's really all it's going to take to make that decision. Plus, they did beat Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's a fraud, as we all know, but they still did. So they're going to move in over Clemson, which Dabo is not going to like at all. But, that's a very – I mean, I cannot see them taking Clemson over like a 1-loss or a 2-loss SEC teams at all. It would be really, really a lot of people screaming the next day. Now, I will say that SMU at Virginia, I mean, Virginia can be a little feisty. I'm just saying that I'll be looking at the dog on that one for sure. The Cal situation at the end, there's going to be way more pressure on SMU if they beat Virginia. So I'm going to be looking at those games. But it's fun to discuss, and I think it's something that me and you are gonna visit with every single week coming forward. But I always like to talk about buy low, sell high, because that way you kind of get a gauge on what you're feeling, and it could be maybe for a bet you're making this week, or it could be something that you're waiting on. Last week Brad Powers said he wanted to, Army was his sell high, but he didn't want to do it last week, and Thank God he didn't. He wants to do it this week. Actually, Army didn't cover last week, so he could have done it last week too. But he was looking at North Texas. I'm not so far for sure there. But how about a buy low or sell high team? Well, why don't you start with one buy low team with respect to the market?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one pertaining to the futures, but I'll stay in the AAC actually. I firmly believe Tulane is the best team in that league, and they're still just anywhere between minus 105 to plus 105 to win the American. I will encourage you and all of the listeners, right? The easiest and quickest way you can improve your positioning as a sports bettor and turn profit quicker is to shop around, get the best line, give yourself the best chance to be successful. So please do shop around. But if you can grab Tulane at anywhere between minus 105 and plus 105 to win the American, if you look at the remaining games on their schedule, I believe it's very unlikely that Tulane is going to lose again, and they're certainly not going to lose twice. So they'll secure a spot in the American Conference Championship game. They'll either host it or it'll be on the road at Army. But either way, my current projections have Tulane as a road favorite of minus 6.5, minus 7 at Army in that game. And so you'd be looking at about a minus 220 on the money line, plus 170, plus 180 the other way for Army. And so you can certainly put in a position now on Tulane and hedge out in the conference championship game and guarantee yourself profit either way or let it ride. I think that would be a position I would take. Tulane is just really on fire right now, and I just cannot see this team stumbling up with who they have remaining left on their schedule.
I thought Tulane was going to take a step back in the preseason against Will, but then they lost Fritz, but you haven't. And what's funny that you brought that up. I just looked at them to win the conference 5 minutes before you came on. It was like I was looking for a beer bet banger. Now it doesn't qualify as a beer bet banger because it's minus 105 at most of the books, And so, but I love the way you think because I was thinking the same thing. I am betting Tulane just to let you know at minus 105 to win it. So I didn't give it out yet, but. We'll give it out, I guess, on the show right now. I agree with it 100%. I think that's a wonderful bet now that Navy's probably out of the way, too. I'd rather play Army personally, but, Navy has some injury issues as well. So Tulane is definitely dead set right now to, win this thing. I'm just kind of shopping it around a little bit. Like you say, shop around. I think, we've always preached that, and it's one of the most important things that you can do to get an edge, obviously. The numbers matter. So... I'm really glad that you said that too. And with the widespread legalization of sports gambling in the United States, there's really no excuse. It's not a lot of effort involved or skill to open up 4 or 5 of the legal books. You can fund them with even amounts. And you'll find over the course of 1 week where you make 7 to 10 plays, it may not necessarily come into play. But over the course of a season where you might make 200 plays, it'll be the difference between 4 or 5, 6 plays winning or losing or improving your position on your return. And that can make all the difference between adding up to an extra 10 or 11 units. So it is a significant behavior that I would recommend adopting. Yes, 100%. It's very significant. It's something that we call them outs. You just want to have as many outs as possible,
yep.
And that's going to just eventually, obviously give you a profit when you have hedgeable games at the end, and sometimes you can be pretty sure and let it not not hedge or hedge it live. So there's just a lot of ways to approach it. So make sure you have lots of books. I'm gonna go with an underrated team myself. It's funny. It's like I've switched. I do this every week, obviously for the show, and I pull up my power ratings to kind of just see where I am. When it comes to the market here, that's kind of. How I come up with one. But the truth is I think Clemson is a little underrated now that they had that ugly loss. I can see them kind of coming in and finishing the season hard and be a good ATS cover. Now, are they on bye this week? I think they might be on bye. I have to double check.
At Virginia Tech.
Oh, at Virginia Tech, yeah. Virginia Tech is kind of fraudulent, and that's why you see Clemson as a road favorite here. But I think Clemson could have a little bit of value coming in, just the way that they played. Yes, they had the bad game last week against Louisville, but Dabo Swinney, just like when he lost to Georgia, is going to get these guys fired up again. So I'm looking at Clemson.
Yeah, and real interesting position on Clemson there to see how they rebound after the bad loss. Really a stunning bad loss. my numbers showed that they had a pretty favorable matchup against that defense that had struggled to contain explosive plays off of a bye. They were getting healthier, but my goodness, they just could not cash in the red zone and could not finish drives, which was unfortunate. A little bit of a tougher schedule, though, than many might expect from Clemson, with at Virginia Tech, at Pitt, and then in the finale hosting South Carolina. My goodness, look what they did last week.
Yeah, 100%. That was absolutely, yeah, that's just going to be an interesting spot for them at the very end this year, too. So I agree with that. Well, give me an underrated team now. Or an overrated team, I should say. You did an underrated team in Tulane. Give me an overrated team coming into Week 11 or Week 12.
Yeah, I know they're 8-0 and they've played a lot of good football, but I'm just not in love with BYU. I feel like BYU has really been the benefactor of some fortuitous turnover luck, and they've really benefited from some play where they've really just at home, like home Provo, voodoo at night, and just some of that stuff. So when you factor in who BYU has left, they play a game that I think will be pretty competitive this week in the Holy War. Utah and BYU are two programs that do not like each other. It's a fierce rivalry. I'm not going to necessarily call for BYU to lose, but it's also not out of the realm of possibility. Then they host Kansas next week, and Kansas is kind of a play-on team for me. They had a really tough stretch this season where they were really trying to figure some things out on offense with some key pieces that had departed. They lost their offensive coordinator, so there were some little tweaks to the offense this year compared to last that really didn't pan out. But Kansas will be a play-on team for me the rest of the way. At Arizona State will be a real tricky spot. I really think the Sun Devils are a play-on team as well the rest of the way, getting their quarterback back. As long as Scadaboo is healthy, defense has played well at home. And then they finish up with Houston, who can beat anybody in the league on any given day, as we saw last weekend, is also playing some much more competitive football than early in the season. So it would not surprise me to see BYU drop a couple of games, and maybe that's enough to have them miss the Big 12 championship game, and maybe Iowa State sneaks in, and even Colorado.
Totally. I don't disagree with that. I mean, getting by teams that, like Oklahoma State, they could have lost that game. And Oklahoma State is,
a miracle they won.
Oklahoma State's been pure trash. They have 0 Big 12 wins. They have 6 Big 12 losses. They're 0-6 in the Big 12, So BYU definitely has their issues. But to be honest with you, I mean, I already mentioned, I think SMU is a little overrated, but I think Utah, and it sucks they're playing each other this week, but Utah is the worst Utah that I've seen in over 20 years, man. I mean, I watched them play against TCU. When TCU beat them, I was on Utah, and I thought to myself, this is a terrible bet. TCU should be way up. I immediately faded Utah against Houston the next week, which paid off. And Utah has a little bit of a defense, but that quarterback situation is terrible, and they're talking about putting the freshman in now, I think Isaac Wilson is going to continue.
There's a battle. We'll get into that when we talk about the game, but there's a battle between who's going to even play.
Brandon Rose, right. So I think that is, what do you say, when you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks? Utah is terrible right now, and this is why I picked this game. I don't have a play in it yet, but this is why I picked this game to talk about. So I'm excited to get into that. But now let's get into some NCAA football, my man. Real quick, I know that this is a live show, and tonight is not going to factor in when this comes, but I'm guessing, do you have a play in anything tonight?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great time of the year, right? Last night was a huge night in America because it was the return of Maction, right? And so it was a lot of eyeballs on the TV with Maction returning, and that continues into tonight. And you have 2 games that are kind of under the radar because they're MAC games. I kind of like Western Michigan at home. I've seen a lot of people on NIU. A lot of people feel as though Western Michigan's conference start 4-0 has been fraudulent because they have beaten the 4 worst teams in the Mid-American Conference. But I'm just really not sold on Northern Illinois. While their defense has performed very well this year and they have only lost their 4 games by a combined 9 points, their offense is just broken. They really struggle to move the football. They have very, very little explosive play capability. And it's just one of those games that is just going to be, they're going to have to execute at a high level all game. I really like what's being built at Western Michigan. I like their coach, Lance Taylor. I think he's done a really great job with the program. When you factor where they started last year with all of the roster turnover and the lack of returning production and the situation he walked into, the way they finished the year, and really the way that they've competed this year has been rock solid, in my opinion, for Western Michigan. And every one of their goals is still right in front of them to get to Detroit and be a participant in the MAC championship game. And, I mean, they're leading the conference right now. And so while it's a contrarian play compared to what I've seen, a lot of people like Northern Illinois to kind of expose that Western Michigan defense. But I also see it that NIU really, really is broken offensively. And the line is a pick 'em for a reason, right? And so I think this could be a wrong team favorite situation. And I did play Western Michigan tonight on the money line.
You know, when you say it like that, it sure makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, my line is also pick 'em. You know, I'm very close to this, and maybe I haven't down. And it sounds like from your argument, I didn't downgrade Northern Illinois enough, which is entirely possible. I did watch Western Michigan play my Badgers the very first game, and they covered by a lot. And I thought to myself,
they played really well in the trenches.
They did play very well in the trenches, and they have some serious performers there. Northern Illinois, isn't one of them coming off a bye? I have to look.
Let's check here.
I have to look at that again.
Northern Illinois played last week, and they've really underperformed in league play. Goodness, they lost last week on the road at Ball State.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
I guess it is kind of a mini bye because it was 10 days ago last Saturday, and now we're at Wednesday of the following week. So both these teams played last 10 days ago.
Yeah, they both exactly played on the same day, and that's why I was wondering about that. So that's interesting. They just happen to have the same rest, but they flip-flopped the schedule. So that's kind of fun. Dude, I do not disagree with that. If I look at – I have a little algorithm in the recency – actually has Western Michigan minus 6.7 if I look at the last 3 games numbers. If I look at the full year, it's Northern Illinois minus 3.9. But if I kind of combine it, it favors Western Michigan a little bit. So I find that really interesting. I'm going to watch this line a little bit. I could join you on that. We'll see. Let's move into Friday, though, because Friday we got some massive games coming up here. And one is, another team that destroyed my Badgers, Iowa. And they are going to UCLA. And they're about a 6-point road favorite right now. The total is 45 in this game. I'm curious, Josh, which way you're going to go with this because you picked this game to discuss.
Yeah, and I have made a habit of fading Iowa just because of their offensive woes over the past couple of seasons to pick spots where they would struggle. I loved Iowa last week. I hate to say it against your Badgers. I wrote that game up as a best bet over at Action Network.
No, and by all means, dude. You got to be able to bet against your teams. I didn't bet at all, but if I was going to, I would have bet Iowa.
Yeah, I loved Iowa, just given the spot. They are 18-1 at home in their last 19 home games in November. So they peak late in the season and they play their best football at home in November. And so pertaining to this game specifically, I actually think the quarterback change to Sullivan has been a good thing. He seems to have much more command of the offense. The offense has rallied around him. I love the way they're running the football. I mean, their running back Johnson is just having an unreal season. And so UCLA has been the benefactor of winning a couple of games. Yeah, I don't really know. A couple stats I think that are really going to expose UCLA in this game. They're 128th in offensive success rate and 128th in finishing drives. And so when you're facing Iowa and you start behind the chains and you really don't gain that success that you need on first and second down, you're not going to convert third down, which they already do. at a poor rate. And then when you do happen to move the ball in between the 20s and get it into the scoring range, UCLA red zone touchdowns 8 out of 20 trips. So they've settled for field goals far too frequently in the red zone. And Iowa's defense has just allowed 13 red zone touchdowns on the season. So I don't see a real clear path to UCLA putting up a lot of points. And I also struggle to see how UCLA is going to hold up in the trenches here, right? They're not playing really good football. They've allowed 22 sacks. They're only averaging 73 rushing yards on a 2.8 average. It's really going to be a struggle against that Iowa front seven, who may not wow you with the talent that's in the SEC, but Iowa defense does not make mistakes. They do not give up explosive plays, and they come up clutch when needed in the red zone and on third down. And so with UCLA only converting third down about 37% and Iowa only allows it at 31%, I mean, you're looking at probably a 4 for 13 type of third down performance. That's going to result in a lot of punts, or you're going to have to go for it at midfield. And are you going to get it? Tough to say. So I think that UCLA is getting a little bit too much respect for what they did going on the road and beating Nebraska. I'm not sold that this team is any good. I laid 5.5 with Iowa on the road.
I'm mad that this line went against me when I bet it days ago at Iowa 6.5. I saw it at 5.5 open. I wanted to wait because I thought contrarian money would move it down. And we don't talk about which side we're taking before. We just happen to align perfectly on this one. I don't know how you can bet a team like UCLA right now after kind of a letdown spot. They go on the road and win 2. They kind of come home fat and happy. This team is awful on running the ball. They rank 132nd in offensive success rate on rushing the ball. That is terrible. And that's only the way you beat Iowa is really their defensive rushing play success rate isn't quite as high. Their rushing PPA is good, though, at 38. But if you can't run the ball in Iowa, they're going to play easy defense on you and pick you. Guess what? Iowa is plus 10 in turnover margin because they take care of the ball, and UCLA is minus 5 in turnover margin. Bad teams turn the ball over. That's all it's going to take really to cover this margin is just being plus the side of the turnover ratio. There is nothing that tells me that UCLA is sustainable here in this. But one thing I do notice is I like to jump on teams with momentum. Now that they switched from Cade McNamara to Brendan Sullivan, this team is fired up. 70% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions so far. They're running the ball much better. It's not like Wisconsin didn't try last week, but their trenches through Wisconsin around like a bunch of rag dolls, man. I was watching that game and I was like, this is sure changed, They don't stop they stop explosive plays, ranking 6th in the nation, so I'm not worried about that for UCLA here. This spread is 9 in my numbers, man. I don't know why it's below the 7. I am completely with you. This is an official play from me. We're taking it at the minus 6 right now because that's what the current line says. So totally with you, my man.
I like it. And another thing to add too, right? Iowa has such a perception around their offense being bad. They've scored 40 points 3 of the last 4 games, and their offense has really started to show some incremental improvement. And that's really all it takes to turn a 3-point game into a 14-point game when you have the marginal gains on offense, drive in and drive out, picking up third downs, converting in the red zone, scoring 7s instead of 3s. And so, yeah, I like the trend for Iowa and where they're headed. So that's a really solid play.
All right. Well, great. We're both on it. Let's move on to the next one. And this is another one you picked. Rice versus Memphis. Is this also Friday or is this Saturday?
It is.
All right.
Friday.
Look at this. We got 2 Friday games from Step on a Duck. You got to love that. Thanks, Josh. 2 Friday games to talk about. So I have a feeling which way you're going with this. I haven't made a play yet, but I'm close. Let's hear you break it down.
Yeah, so we talked in the buy low, sell high segment earlier, and this is a situation where I think you could do that for both of these teams, right? So Rice comes in off of the win against Navy. They fired their head coach. They got E.J. Warner back, and they really rallied the troops, which you will oftentimes see teams do after a head coach is fired. They'll rally around the interim coach, but that usually is for 1 game, and then reality sets in, and you kind of go back to what you were. And so you've got a couple things with Rice. really, really struggle on the road. So Rice is 0-4 on the road. They've lost to Houston, Army, Tulane, and UConn. They're averaging 10 points per game on the road, and they really just struggle with any sort of continuity on offense with consistency. One thing that I think is really concerning here is while they have not played very well over the last couple of games, the metrics are good for Memphis. Memphis is 5th in defensive havoc achieved. Havoc is typically defined as sacks, turnovers, negative plays, and Rice is 82nd nationally in allowing offensive havoc. They allow way too many negative plays, and they really struggle to run the football. Memphis has secured 20 sacks this year and 62 tackles for loss. I feel as though, when facing Navy and even Army to an extent, the service academies, they play a base defense. They don't really secure a lot of pressure. And so Rice was able to kind of sit back there with EJ and kind of pick them apart. Well, the reads are going to have to be quicker. There's going to be a little bit more pressure against the Memphis defensive front seven. EJ is going to be squeezing the ball a little harder, and I think that's going to be really a disaster for him. He's already only played mediocre football this year with a 10-11 touchdown to interception ratio and completing 62%. Rice struggles on third down. I feel like this is kind of a situation as well to buy low on Memphis. When you look at Memphis and kind of what they've done the last couple of weeks, really struggled against UTSA. Now, they won a close game against Charlotte. They let a couple of backdoor scores come through, but they had controlled that game in the second half. But prior to that, they beat South Florida 21-3, beat Middle Tennessee 24-7. They held Florida State to 12. This is a defense that can step up and rise to the occasion, and I think this is a perfect spot here. I'm not confident in Rice's offense. I think this will be a lower scoring game. I would lean Memphis -9, but I would also play Rice's team total under 22. We've got a Vegas implied score here of 31-22. I'd look at Rice's team total under 22. They have not surpassed 22 all season. They're averaging 10 points per game on the road, and I think this is a spot for Memphis to kind of get right and get their season back on track after a couple shaky performances on defense.
I like the team total much better than the spread because I was actually going to slightly disagree with you if you're going to say the spread. So I guess maybe since it's a lean, we both have a slight disagreement there. But I definitely like the team total because Memphis does have a defense, and they're number 30th in success rate. Their defensive EPA 69th, not terrible, but that's because they gave up a lot of yards last year. The spot really screams Memphis because now they got the coaching bump with Rice. They already got the win for that. Now it's time to fade them. That's just the spot to fade them. They're in fade spot, and Memphis is in a complete buy-in spot after puking all over themselves at UTSA. They probably got too cocky. They had one loss before that, and then they go and just lose to UTSA, which some people probably lost some survivor plays on that one. Actually, a couple did in mine. So I found that real interesting. But that's why I don't like playing road favorites and survivor as much as I can, especially in college football. But here we are, man. I think the spot screams Memphis. I just think that the metrics in itself, I think Rice does have a good defense. And Rice, believe it or not, is a positive 0.57 yards per play on a schedule ranking 86th on Sagarin, when Memphis' schedule ranks 111th, and they're only 0.49 positive yards per play. So here's my argument for Rice. They're number 16th on defensive yards per play at 4.8. There are actually some decent defensive stats as well. I'm thinking under maybe for the whole game, but I also love the fact that their offense only ranks 116th in PPA, and they're not going to move the ball against Memphis, who has a pretty solid defense and success rate, like you mentioned. So I'm with you on the under 22, and I'm going to consider an under for the full game. I don't think Memphis scores that much.
I like it.
All right, let's move on to the next game. I'm going to write that as a lean here. A lot of times, when we do this stuff, I come up with plays. I get off the ledge. You're on the fence. We talk it through. I talk to another sharp person on the show, and it really gives you some ideas. So definitely that under 22 and under full game is something I'm going to look for, and you can always split that up too. Half your bet on one, half your bet on the other. All right. Let's move on to the next game. Syracuse versus Boston College. Boston College is minus I have it at 2.5. I just saw it again at 1.5. Let me see what it is. I want to be accurate for the show. 1.5. I'd rather use 1.5 personally. Total is 53. So, I mean, this is the spot of all spots, in my opinion, Josh. Syracuse coming off a misleading final score. Big win at home against Virginia Tech. They just became bowl eligible. They just got to 6. They're probably feeling pretty good about themselves right now. Boston College coming off a loss and a bye week, but it was a very good loss against Louisville. At Louisville, only losing by 6-7 points. Looking at the metrics, I don't understand this spread, man. Syracuse is negative 0.41 yards per play on a schedule ranking 63rd on Sagarin, while Boston College is dead even on a schedule ranking 47th. Syracuse ranks 74th in offensive EPA. Boston College is close at 80th, but on defense, it's not even close. Boston College is 50th. Syracuse is 99th. They can't stop anybody. And if their offense isn't on, they're done. I can't trust Syracuse on the road. They have a -3 turnover ratio. The home team has a +4 turnover ratio. You know what's going to happen on this game. I mean, also a situational kicker, man. It's just Boston College coming off the bye. Syracuse in a letdown spot right now. This is Eagles no-brainer, and it's one of my largest plays of the week. Boston College -1.5 for 3 stars. Josh, any thoughts?
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate, we did not compare notes before the show, so this is just coincidental or sharp capping by both of us here, but this is exactly where you want to back Boston College. You want Boston College at home off of a bye where they really play spirited football. And yeah, they lost against Louisville, but let's look at where they were at in the middle of the third quarter in that game. They blew a lead, but 27-10 they were up in the middle of the third quarter, and they were firmly in control of that game against the Cardinals. I like Tommy Castellanos at quarterback, and when Syracuse plays against mobile quarterbacks, they really struggle to contain them because when the play breaks down, the offense has the advantage, especially with Tommy C using his legs here to extend drives, to stay on the field on third down. I just, like you had mentioned, the QSD is just so bad. 113th in defensive success rate allowed, 113th in defensive pass rate allowed. There's a formula here for Boston College to get a win and kind of get their season back on track after a couple of tough performances in a row. Strong position here for Boston College. I love the spot. I love the personnel matchup. Like you had said before, this is an interesting spot for Syracuse because they just achieved bowl eligibility. So maybe we get a little bit of an exhale spot from them. The last 3 years, if you go back and look historically, now I know it's a different coaching staff. I know it's different personnel, but this is the time in the season to fade the Qs. They fade fast at the end of the year. They do every single year. They start hot and they fade fast. And I would expect more of the same this year from Syracuse as well. I like Boston College in this matchup.
All right, man. Well, that's great. I'm glad we line up again. So that's good. The only real disagreement we have is just like a side we're not even betting. So good stuff so far. And we do encourage disagreement here, as you know, because it's not like we look for it, but we want to be honest and forthright for you guys. So let's keep talking games. Cal versus Wake Forest. And you picked this one. ACC matchup here. Cal traveling to Wake Forest across the country. Wake Forest +7, total 55. Josh, I'm sure you have something for us on this one.
Yeah, real interesting matchup here. California 0-4 in ACC competition, and they have lost those 4 ACC games by a combined total of 9 points. Florida State on the road, the blunder against Miami where they were up by 3 touchdowns, at Pitt, and then hosting NC State before they did get back on track a couple of weeks ago by blowing out a weak Oregon State team. Cal's offense is just a mess. They really struggle in finishing drives. They cannot score touchdowns in the red zone, and they settle for field goals far too frequently. A real concern here is Jaden Ott, their do-it-all running back, has just not performed well this season and has just battled consistent lingering injuries. And so I really am going to be interested to see Cal on their 3rd cross-country road trip. The first 2 have been really unkind to them, losing low-scoring games against Florida State and Pitt. Yeah. Now, you talk about teams that are peaking. Wake Forest kind of fits that model as they've won the last couple of games after a tough loss against Clemson where they were blown out by 5 touchdowns. They beat a really good UConn team on the road and then went on the road across the country and beat Stanford, which is kind of one of those situations where they're still fighting for a bowl game and trying to get their season back on track here. I like what I've seen the last 2 weeks from Hank Bachmeier. He's played efficient football. The concern is, again, for Cal, the travel, the Friday spot off of a short week. Cal really struggles on first and second down. If you look back at their games, their offensive success rate on standard downs and on first and second down has been low. And so what happens with California? They're in third and long a lot, and it's not sustainable to expect them to convert, stay on the field, and move the ball. The over-under in this one has ticked up a little bit, and I think that on paper you could see California and Wake Forest and think about a high-flying affair with a bunch of points. I don't necessarily see it that way, though. I see Wake Forest playing a couple low-scoring games in a row now. California has significant struggles on offense, but their defense is actually really an underrated unit that's played well in league play. So I'd go under. I think it's 56 is where we're at here. Let me just pull the updated number. 55.
Okay, 55.
I'd play under 55 here between Wake and Cal.
All right, well, there you go. Under 55, and that's what it is on DK right now. A little bit of juice to the under -112, so it looks like you're onto something. Also, check those weather spots, too, because it might be raining down there. I know there's a small chance of rain there. There's a couple big rain games coming up here. I already attacked a few unders myself with rain and wind. It's more wind, but if it's rain, I like, and the rushing defense is good, then I definitely like the under as well. So that's kind of the double whammy right there for you. So good stuff, so the under 55 for Cal, and I don't disagree at all with that. I think Cal, Wilcox kind of guy that's not going to put one on you. He's going to chill out. He's more of a defensive oriented guy anyway, so that's very possible. Let's move on.
Yeah, one last thing I'll say too, when I'm looking at play metrics that are required in order to necessitate an under, I really want to look at how teams perform in the red zone. Wake Forest only 18 of 34 touchdown percentage in the red zone, and California 17 out of 34. So they get into the red zone, it's only a 50-50 proposition that they're going to score touchdowns. Most teams are in that 68 to 72% touchdown range. Both of these offenses really just find themselves stuck in the mud in the red zone. So watch for several field goals to be kicked when they do move it down inside the 20.
Yep, Cal only ranks 85th in total red zone. That probably includes field goals. We got to double check that stat. And then, I agree with you there. It's the red zone struggling is great for the unders as well. So let's move on to the next game. We're doing a big one for you here because, in my opinion, I think this is the biggest game of the weekend. It's Georgia Ole Miss. A lot of people might say it's, Bama LSU, but it's Georgia Ole Miss. And I sometimes forget to say the spread. I'm going to say it. It's plus 2.5, and the total is 55. And unfortunately, it's not where I bet it because I bet it at plus 3.5 early as soon as that thing came out. But sometimes you got to know when those lines are going to move in which direction. And this is just a spot, man. And this is, it's funny. This is fighting for the playoffs for both of these teams. Ole Miss can't take a loss. Georgia can't take the loss. And it's the same for Bama LSU, and maybe we'll talk about that too. We got to. But, man, I think that just watching the champion, Georgia, the champion 2 out of 3 last years, coming in, this is a spot for them, but I'm still not liking them. From an injury standpoint, both teams are banged up. You wonder if Trey Harris is going to finally come back for Ole Miss. I hope he does, Josh. I want a great game. He's been out for like 3 weeks or so. But Georgia's also got some woes with Trevor Etienne. Etienne's been banged up. He didn't get to play a lot. I think that's just could be an injury that, they'll never report well on college injuries. You know that. But I can't expect him to be 100% either, meaning the other 2 guys are going to come in and there's less possible for turnovers. Looking at the numbers, Georgia has 2 advantages. Actually, looking at really everything, Georgia has 2 advantages. One's the coaching. You cannot take that away from Georgia. Kirby Smart is the better coach right now. That's for sure. The other advantage is that they played a stronger strength of schedule. They did. They played a stronger strength of schedule by some. It's not like Ole Miss played a bunch of tomato cans, but for the most part. But everything else really screams Ole Miss. They have a positive 3.3 net yards per play. Georgia's at 1.72. But Ole Miss, man, they can move that ball. Ole Miss is number 4 in both offensive EPA, and they're number 4 in defensive PPA. You add that up, they're the number 1 team in EPA. They are. Because there's no team that's 1 and 2. I mean, there's no. It's Ole Miss, and maybe kind of Oregon's hovering somewhere, and Ohio State is too. But it's them. Georgia ranks 31st and 16th, respectively, in EPA. So they're just not as good. Georgia, obviously, over the years, they've had the best talent, and you see them all go in the NFL. But this is finally the year that the cupboards run a little bit bare. This is the team you're kind of seeing without the Brock Bowers. It's really affected them, in my opinion. The quarterback's dating a bunch of models from Miami. I guess they play sports too, but getting Lamborghinis and stuff. Forget about it, man. This dude's. I think he's taking that NIL money. He's not making smart decisions. I get it. You're young, but dude, I mean, come on. You can buy that stuff later after your second NFL contract, right? Right. I don't know. The whole flashiness before you made it to the top of your goals, I'm just not a big fan of that. But obviously, I'm detracting from the game. But Ole Miss's offensive and defensive trenches, they grade out higher than Georgia too. If you look on the defensive and offensive line yards, it's Ole Miss, and it's if Lane Kiffin gets out coached again, yeah, I will suck it up and say my bad. But dude, this is just the only spot for Ole Miss. And to be honest with you, Georgia. They lose to Ole Miss, there's still a chance they can get in because they'll say Bama has worse losses even though Georgia lost to Bama. I think that Georgia, because this is more of a desperation. But I took Ole Miss, of course, at the 3.5, but I still like it at 2.5 for 2.5 stars. What are your thoughts, Josh?
Yeah, great game here. I think the line at this point is an indicator that Ole Miss is really going to compete here. A couple things to touch on the Georgia offense. I mean, like you had mentioned, Carson Beck just kind of looks average, right? He hasn't been lighting it up in games where he typically would. You've got one Georgia receiver that's averaging over 16 yards a catch, and the offensive explosiveness has been down compared to years past. They really do look like they're missing Brock Bowers, who was so clutch over the middle, who was so clutch on third down, who could stretch the defenses or open it up for other guys, and that really is concerning. You think of Ole Miss and you think about Lane Kiffin throwing it around in a high-flying offense, but I think the most underrated unit on the field is the Ole Miss defense here, which is allowing 13 points a game, only 82 rushing yards and 2.3 yards per attempt. Their stuff rate is solid. Their intestinal fortitude in the trenches has been really, really strong all season against the rigors of SEC competition, and I think that'll come to play here. Now, Ole Miss also on defense plays their best football on third down. They're allowing a ridiculously low 29% third down conversion rate. And Georgia in past seasons has been up at like 47, 49% third down. They're at 38 this year. And so what you're going to see is you're going to see Georgia not be able to run the football. They might struggle to be in third and favorable situations. They're going to have to convert third down. So who's going to step up for Georgia in that situation? Where's the offensive explosiveness going to come from? Who's going to make the tough 3rd and 8 catch over the middle to get the first down and keep the drive moving rather than punting? I just don't know that I can trust backing that when I really haven't seen it week in and week out. And while Georgia has kind of come alive in the second halves of some of these games, their performance in the first half has really left a lot to be desired. Now, when teams have been able to move the ball on Ole Miss in the red zone, they shut it down, right? 10 red zone touchdowns allowed all season in 24 trips. And the Yuga offense, or the Georgia offense, is only converting in the red zone about 60% of the time for touchdowns. And so they have also just, compared to historical priors and what you typically would expect from these teams, there's not as much offensive punch here. What I like in this game, it's kind of an interesting play based on where we have the side and total. I'm going to go first half under 27.5. I think this is one of these situations where both of these teams are going to kind of be feeling each other out early. Again, I had mentioned Ole Miss. You just assume they're going to be throwing the ball around and they're going to be scoring a lot of points. They actually run the ball more than they throw the ball, which is atypical of a Lane Kiffin coached offense, but they're really focusing in on running the football and controlling the line of scrimmage. And I think that this is just going to be one of those situations where you've got a couple of big punches. Maybe they don't land. Both of these defenses are good at limiting explosiveness. And this could be punt, field goal in the first quarter. And then, again, it could be something that opens up later on. Revolver to my head right now, I feel like Ole Miss, this is a spot where they have got to eventually rise up, and this is the spot and the wow factor for them to win this game. But I think this could be a low-scoring trench battle in the first half. So 27.5s are out there. I'd go first half under 27.5.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think that's a wonderful play. I should have hit that Ohio State one last week without that pick six, man. That was, missed it by a half point. It's just one of those, I just hope that don't happen in this game. But you know what? And that's why when you bet, it's like there's a percentage based on everything. It's like, 33% is time. That's 1 out of 3 times it's going to go over your play. But I'll play that all day and make millions if I knew it was like that every single time, right? It's just that you got to play the percentages. No,
I'm really glad that you bring that. I'm really glad you bring that up, because there's 2 things at play here that all of your listeners can take away from this. You're making plays that are positive EV plays based on the research and the analytics. And if a play doesn't hit, even if the game situation plays out as expected, a game may not hit for a variety of different factors, and it doesn't make it a bad cap. It doesn't make it a bad play. And again, when you're looking at a week-to-week sample of 7 to 10, 15 plays, sometimes that variance can happen. But you and I have been in this long enough to know there's going to be 1,000, 1,500 plays. It's going to, with the proper work and preparation that's been done, it's going to pan out in your favor more often than not. But sometimes, it's just, you're betting on 18 to 22-year-old kids and they play with an oblong-shaped football, and sometimes it's just gonna bounce a weird way sometimes.
1,000%. Stay off the big parlays. I mean, you can have fun with it.
All the guys tell you.
You can have fun with it for $10-$20, whatever, but just don't put your big stuff on it, dude. Don't. It's not the way to do it. You're going to lose. Have fun just betting game by game. All right, so let's move to the next one. And we got to talk, obviously, Alabama, LSU. And what's funny is I had this at +3, but this is down now. And unfortunately, this is where I make the line. I have LSU +2.5. And that sucks because, I was thinking, God, maybe this could move to 3.5 and I'll play LSU. But for me, no, I make this LSU 2.5. I think LSU is a serious contender. But at the same time, Alabama's in a spot, man. They're in a spot, a big spot. And they're playing for their season. I guess LSU is too. But Bama's just got a little bit more talent. LSU still has great talent, but I think Jalen Milroe will win you the game at the end. I'm not sure if Nussmeier will win you the game at the end. I seen him do it a few times in their bowl last year against Wisconsin, and it completely decimated. Both teams were decimated on both sides. Actually, Wisconsin was more decimated than they were for guys holding out of that game. But going back to the cap, man, I didn't really write anything up because I'm not going to bet it. Not at this number. I suppose I would lean to the under in this situation. It's already got down there a little bit. It's funny. You look at LSU, Alabama back in 2019. You couldn't even put out enough points for these 2 teams, man. That was like some of the best LSU year I've ever seen in my life for any college football team. But 58's kind of high in such an important matchup, man. So here I am talking myself into the under. You got to see that defensive success rate. Alabama at least ranks 15th, and they're not exactly going to put up pace unless they really need it at the end of a game. They're still going to play pretty methodically, but their defensive passing success rate is 6th. And that's what Nussmeier needs is to pass the ball, and that's what they do. But if Alabama's stopping the pass, LSU can't really run the ball this year. They're not good at running it. I'm probably thinking under or Alabama, unfortunately. What about you?
Yeah, so you've got Kalen DeBoer coming in off a bye and really needs to draw something up here to save their season in what could be, really the first de facto playoff game, right? The loser almost certainly is eliminated from playoff contention.
Yes.
And the winner still will have a path. I trust Jalen Milroe a lot more than I do Nussmeier, and I also trust the Alabama secondary a little bit more than I do LSU's. After Alabama had lost against Tennessee and Vanderbilt for that matter, people were really bagging on the Alabama secondary being the worst in the SEC or a bottom half of the SEC, which is just ridiculous. It's just not true based on the personnel and the metrics. Alabama still does have an elite secondary. I go back to LSU's last game that they played when they faced A&M, and they did have some success early. And then once the pressure started getting to Nussmeier, he really started making bad decisions. And once the A&M D line really started to force the issue, they just couldn't find it, right? He was throwing balls in the dirt. He couldn't complete the 15-yard out. He couldn't complete the dig route over the middle. He couldn't find the running back in the hot route in the flats to pick up 8 yards when they needed it. And it was just it was really a huge ass whooping in the second half against A&M, which was a really critical thing that we'll need to see from Alabama. They're going to have to get pressure on Nussmeier. I think they'll be able to do it. LSU also, they struggle in surrendering explosive passes on defense, 96th in explosive pass rate surrendered. And I feel like you've got a much more capable playmaker in Jalen Milroe in a situation where they have to have it. Now, the concern on the other side, because there's always two sides to the coin here, is you are facing LSU at night at home, and that environment is just really something that's tough. Even Saban always struggled in those environments where it was just one of those things that's like BYU at night. It's just one of those environments that's really tough to play in. And so I think it'll be back and forth for a while. You know, this could be a situation where even if you don't play this game pre-flop, this could be a great live trading opportunity where someone goes up 7-0 and you take the other team on the money line live and then wait for a little bit of a comeback, and you could end up being on plus sides of both of them and be a winner either way, which sometimes those games play out that way really well, where you can get on both sides of it and kind of arbitrage bet it and really have no risk and still come out ahead no matter who wins. This is typically, like you had mentioned, this is a game I would typically lay off and just kind of watch and enjoy as a fan of the sport, and I still may do that. But I think this is one of those situations where I like Kalen DeBoer having time in a situation where their team is kind of in desperation mode here, and they really need to start getting things together before the last couple games of their season after they play Mercer. I think Alabama, if pressed, I think Alabama will win the game and cover. I would assume it'd be about a touchdown game.
Touchdown game. All right. Yeah, I my number, you know, like I said, Milroe, I trust him more at the end, even though my number is exactly on the number right now, so I don't no disagreement there. I'm still going to look at the under a little bit here, check the weather before the game. I'm not rushing to this one. You know, I look at LSU, and they did give up 38 points, but that was at a Texas A&M team that switched their quarterback out to Marcel Reed, and they weren't prepared for that, and that's going to happen. And that's why this total's a little bit higher. You know, they you know, that Ole Miss game that they had, that was such a coin flip, man, and that still was under 58. It ended up at 55, but that thing was just back and forth a little bit, and then all the way up to the end. Yeah, it's I'm thinking under in this one for sure. Let's move on to the last game that we have, and then we'll quick hodgepodge it. Utah hosting BYU. Utah +4 is the line right now, and I'm guessing this total's got to be disgustingly low.
40?
40.5. 40.5, Josh. So I'm close to having a play. I want to hear you talk about this game first.
Yeah, well, Utah's just been a mess, right? The quarterback situation has been rough, similar to what we saw last year, right? We're not getting a lot of truth out of the injury report. Cam Rising wasn't healthy, and they kind of strung bettors and fans along about whether or not he's going to play or not play or whatever it might be. And the offensive metrics for Utah are just really weak, right? They really struggle in the interior offensive line. What's really concerning for Utah is, and it's different than what we've seen from Utah over the last 10 to 15 years, is they just have no attitude on the offensive line, right? They used to be able to just push people around and bully them, and they had explosive running backs that would be able to kind of do whatever they wanted, along with solid play from multiple tight ends. And I haven't seen the explosiveness this year from Keithy. The receiver room is lacking playmakers. And so Utah's really up against it here. Their explosiveness is low at 96th. And goodness, it's really hard to see based on the quarterback situation. Now there's talks out there that it could be Wilson, and it also might be Rose. So they haven't decided who's going to play. But just go back and look at the tape from the last couple of games when either one of those players has been the primary, and it's been rough sledding for Utah offensively. You factor in 122nd in pass EPA per play, 115th in pass down success rate. They're only 99th in rush play explosiveness, and they're low in rush play EPA. I mean, it's just going to be a real struggle here for Utah to score a lot of points. I think for Utah to hang in this game, they're going to have to control the clock, really muck this game up, keep BYU's offense off the field. And so the one thing we know is it's the Holy War. Utah's hosting it. It's going to be a crazy environment. These two programs do not like each other. That only carries you so far, right, before the personnel lines up and you really have to find a way to execute on the field. I would assume this game will be close late, but I am, based on the Vegas implied here, and I'm going to shop around for the best number, but I would take Utah's team total under 18.5. So against FBS competition this season, Utah team totals are 6-1 to the under. And so, they have not achieved and surpassed their team total in the last 5, and they didn't do it against Baylor either. They did surpass it against a really, really bad Utah State team. But Utah State is surrendering 50 points every game against terrible competition, and Utah only scored 38 on them. So I think this is a situation where I need to see more from Utah with attitude on the offensive line, with execution from the quarterback room, and with playmaking explosiveness. And I'm okay betting that we won't see that this week against BYU. So I would take Utah's team total under 18.5.
No, definitely. How can you not like that one? I find that team total and see some books will probably mess with you and juice it and put it at 17. There's shop that around. I'm with you on that one. That makes total sense. I'm really thinking about betting BYU, and I think I'm going to. There's no metric that I have that has BYU losing this game by, or not losing this game, but not winning this game by 6 or 7 points minimum. There's nothing out there. The only thing you're betting on right now, if you're Utah bettor or fan or whatever, is the coach. The coach coming off a bye, a rough loss at Houston, 4 losses in a row. Can he rally the troops to make a bowl game because they have 4 wins? That's what you're betting on. Is that enough? But maybe it's not enough because you still have a team that is the worst skill I've seen in 20 years. You have no quarterback. You have a quarterback controversy going on with a freshman and a sophomore right now, and they can't throw the ball. Their offensive PPA is 110th. And the only reason it's 110 is because Cam Rising played some games. That's so bad.
They played Southern Utah and beat them 49-0. That's part of the factor.
Absolutely. And here's some weird stuff too. They got to play Arizona State, and Arizona State, I think, had some injuries that game, and Arizona State beat them pretty good. They haven't played the best offenses out there. They played Houston's offense and lost. They played TCU, and TCU's offense is not the TCU we remember. They played Utah State and Oklahoma State and Baylor. This is the first time they're facing a ranked team. It sucks to lay points on the road when it comes to these situations, but man, BYU is also looking at this as the opportunity to put their foot down. Literally, this is the team that can beat Utah. It's like the coach has to go out there and give them that speech, man. And it's like, can they afford to lose a game? Are they going to be thinking about the playoffs in this situation? Or are they going to think about putting it to Utah, their rival? The time to fade BYU, I think, is at Colorado next week. I think that's going to be a great spot to fade BYU. But I don't think it's going to be this week because guess what? BYU's coming off the bye as well. They've been watching what to do against this team. Yeah, I'll take it at -4. I'll make that a play. It's not a big play, a couple stars maybe, but I'm going to do that, and maybe I'll be sorry later, but I think this Utah team is sorry, and they could be up for an ass whipping. And I also like your team total under, Josh, in this situation.
Yeah, let's look at just real quick, too, some of the BYU defensive metrics, right? So they're 39th nationally in havoc, so they're going to get some pressure to the quarterback of Utah, which will make them panic, make tough decisions, maybe have to throw the ball half a second earlier than expected. 24th BYU in defensive EPA per play, 7th in pass play success rate allowed. How's Utah going to throw the football here? They don't have any playmakers that have stepped up to this point in the season, and inexperienced quarterback play that they can't feel confident in. So the other thing that I'd look at is standard down success rate, BYU 29th nationally. And so you've got first and second down. Utah has struggled compared to years prior and really compared to other teams this season in being able to run the football. The offensive line we've already talked about doesn't have any attitude. So you're going to see Utah struggle to run the ball, probably average 2.9 yards a carry. They're going to be in third down, and they're going to have it. And so you're going to see pressure on the quarterback. You don't have really any expectation that you're going to have success passing the football. I just don't see how they stay on the field, right? They're going to be 3 and out, might get a first down here and there, and then you're going to be punting at midfield. This is going to be a struggle for Utah to score the football here. I'd be shocked if we see them with any more than 13-17. So you're looking at BYU scoring 3 touchdowns in order to win your bet. I think that's a pretty positive EV play there on BYU.
All right, cool. I hope so too, man. We'll see. And I also like that team total a little bit under. Maybe I do a little bit of both in this situation. So here we are, my man. Got through a great bunch of games. What about some randoms? This Miami Georgia Tech game that's early on Saturday. I really need to know about Haynes King, but I guess what? We're probably not going to find out till game time, right?
I would guess so. I would guess there is some motivation for Miami. If I'm Mario Cristobal, I play the tape of the last 2 minutes of last year's game, really the last 45 seconds, where they could have taken knees and won the game. They handed the ball off. Miami's running back fumbled. Georgia Tech goes down the field and scores a touchdown on the last play of the game and wins in a totally preventable situation. Yeah. I'm playing that tape and saying, guys, we've got to close this game out. Time for a little payback for Georgia Tech. I need to know if Haynes King is going to be in or not, because he is a significant upgrade at quarterback compared to who's been in there the last several weeks. But this could be a spot if he's out where Miami rolls.
Oh, 100%. I would play the tape, but Cristobal is such a bonehead. I don't know if he would. He's a bad coach. He's just a bad coach on a very good team that paid for a bunch of players on offense, and their defense absolutely stinks. I almost think if Haynes King is playing this game, this drops to 7, maybe 7.5. But it's also a situation where, man, you wish you had the 11.5 before that happened. Yeah. Let's look at one more before we go to beer bet bangers. What about, let's go back to the Big Ten here. Rutgers is +6 against Minnesota. I almost said Minnesota might be a little bit overrated. I did lose it on last week. I had Illinois with a great number at 3.5, and I lost on that one. It was just more of Illinois messing up on themselves. Minnesota's gotten solid since that North Carolina lost in the first week or so. They came back against Michigan. I had Minnesota that game. I was driving back from San Diego, and I was shocked to look at the score and seeing whoa, they came back and covered my 10. But that was really weird. I think ever since then they kind of got their heads out of their ass. But man, Rutgers is coming off the bye, and they were super injured coming into the bye. I wonder if this could be a sneaky Rutgers play.
Yeah, and Rutgers really has to get off the mat, right? They started 4-0. They had a huge monster win in a Friday night situation hosting Washington. In a game they were really outplayed. They were significantly outgained. There were some Washington special teams gaffes. And then ever since that point, it's been a real struggle for Rutgers. They have been another team that's lost their identity on offense and lost their attitude. I would love to back Rutgers in this spot. My problem with Rutgers is they just have so much to be desired in the passing game. They just have had no consistency at the quarterback position. It's hard to believe that that quarterback that they have there. I'm going to butcher his name. It's the Greek
Kali
Manis.
Yes, but he played at Minnesota last year. I think isn't that kind of one of those, dude? This is the chance to get your old team back.
Slow it on a little bit.
Play a great game. You know, I look at that as just such an interesting spot, and I think I'm going to use this for the next segment. That's why I brought this up too. It's the question is, can Kalik Manis play well? Because I know Minnesota obviously where he played, but Minnesota's also pretty good on offense and defense. They're like at 0.6 yards per net yards per play. Just kind of solid, not turning the ball over, rowing the boat. His coach likes to say over there. But Rutgers ended up being kind of a fraud, and they were sniffed out, and they were beaten really bad in some games. But if there's a spot to back them, I think it is coming back home against Minnesota. So that's what I'm looking for. And let's just move into beer bet bangers, because this is going to be my beer bet banger. I'm just going to put some beer money on Rutgers to win outright here. You're getting about plus 180, probably shopping around plus 190 here on DK. So that's going to be my beer bet banger, just because of the history with the quarterback and the fact that they're coming off the bye week after a nasty loss at Southern Cal. So I'm taking them at plus 200 here, plus 200 on FanDuel for a beer bet banger. What about you?
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I think that's a high probability this is a close game in the fourth quarter, and Rutgers, they need some breaks to go their way, but they'll certainly be in it at the end. So here's an interesting one for you. My beer bet banger bet, and I've got a conference future that we'll discuss in this segment, but I have seen what I have wanted to see in the last 2 weeks from Hawaii. Hawaii has finally started to find it a little bit offensively. The run and shoot is a really hard offense to master. I'm shocked that it's taken this long in year 3 with Timmy Chang, but Hawaii has had 2 very impressive showings in a row, winning against Nevada at home, and then last week at Fresno State. They won 21-20. They actually threw an interception in the red zone, which was returned for a touchdown 88 yards the other way. And Hawaii was down 20-7 on the road at Fresno State. And they had the intestinal fortitude in the fourth quarter to score 2 touchdowns, the last coming with about 15 seconds left, to win that game as 11.5, 12-point underdogs. UNLV having to go on the road. Hawaii is a much different team on the island, and it's always a tough road trip. We saw that play out with Boise State, where Boise State had only scored 13 points in the first half. They ended up pulling away a little bit, but I would not be shocked at all based on the improvements that I've needed to see from Hawaii and the cues that I've seen with them finally being able to make the reads. They're running the football a little bit better, and they're actually playing really, really solid defense against Mountain West competition. I could see Hawaii winning on the field on Saturday night.
Yeah, man. Well, I love it. That's some night game. My buddy calls it connection. His name's Kanaki, and Sean, he's on this all the time. That's fun. That's going to be a late game. Hawaii, you're right. What's it going to take? Get this thing done. It's funny. It's not even that late. It's like 6 p.m. So it's not Mountain Time. So it's not that late. 8 p.m. Eastern. So, it's not, you don't have to stay past 2, 3 in the morning to see if your bet cashes, my man. But who else has been cashing? Who else has been cashing is my man Josh here. And, Josh kills it over at the Action Network. He has wonderful articles. I very much enjoy talking to him on Fridays with Kyle. Can you tell our listeners and viewers where to get your great information and plays?
Yeah, for sure. So like you had mentioned, I'm a writer for the Action Network. I do 10 to 12 articles a week there, write up my plays along with some best bet activity there. I'm on all the major gambling related forums, covers.com, Capping the Game, and the RX forum, and real active on Twitter at Step on a Duck. I've been on the podcast circuit all spring and summer and into the fall. I'm not going to promote anyone else's show, but about 5 or 6 podcasts there. And it's been really awesome to work with you on the Friday spaces with Kyle. And I love getting a couple sharp guys together to discuss the games, and just makes both of us better. So it's been really an excellent season, and appreciate you having me on today.
Oh, wonderful, man. Thanks for the plays, and we'll be texting soon. Thanks again, Josh. Now it is time for
The Sharp Side of the Force.
Sharp Side of the Force is brought to you by this season. For the largest sports contests in all the land, please visit www.thescn.com/OB to get a discount on your next entries. Terms, conditions, and location apply. All right, let's go to Sharp College Football Week 11. Sharp Money Move it as of Wednesday. Rice plus 10.5 to plus 9.5 at Memphis. 40% of the tickets, 79% of the money. Right, Cincinnati minus 2.5 to minus 4.5 hosting West Virginia. 86% of the tickets, 90% of the money. Clemson minus 4.5 to minus 6.5 at Virginia Tech. 80% of the tickets and 90% of the money. South Carolina minus 1.5 to minus 3.5 at Vanderbilt. 45% of the tickets, 79% of the money at Indiana. Minus 11.5 to minus 14.5 hosting Michigan. 78% of the tickets and 82% of the money. Some buyback there. Sharp totals, FAU versus East Carolina over 50.5 to 57. 51% of the tickets, 74% of the money. Minnesota versus Rutgers over 45.5 to 46.5. 94% of the tickets and 96% of the money. Some dual action there. Florida versus Texas under 52.5 to 47.5. 68% of the tickets, 79% of the money. Michigan versus Indiana, again, over 45.5 to 49.5, 96% of tickets and 99% of the money. In Virginia versus Pitt, under 61.5 to 57.5, 44% of the tickets and 67% of the money. I guess that one is just based on incompetence because both teams don't have much of a defense. So to recap for my plays, I'm going to go with Iowa minus 6 for 2 stars. Boston College, my best bet, minus 1.5 for 3 stars. Ole Miss plus 2.5 for a few stars. And BYU minus 4 for 2 stars as well. Josh also likes Iowa minus 6. Rice team total under 22, which I'll probably be on later. Boston College minus 1.5 he likes as well. Cal under 55. And that's Cal Wake Forest. Georgia Ole Miss, he likes first half under 27.5. Find that interesting one. I can see that happening. Utah team total under 18-ish. And I see that as well. Hawaii is his beer bet banger. And my beer bet banger, remember, is Rutgers at the plus 200. My friends, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you have any questions for us, feel free to tweet us at The Oddsbreakers. Email us at info@theoddsbreakers.com. Have a great rest of your week and go get some winners.